And I remember when I was a child living in southern Maryland, and we used to go out in the woods searching for blackberries, searching for sweetness. So if you pull back the branches in the bushes, sometimes we'd see a turtle there, and they'd like turn their head, and there'd be like, there's like faces covered in, blackberries. And they look a little surprised. English turtles. Oh, yeah. But then we could see, we're searching for sweetness. The turtle is searching for I didn't think like that at the time, but I did think it was interesting. On some subtle, primitive, tribal level, I understood we're looking for the same thing. But I had to bend down to get the turtle. He had to look up. So Guru Maharaj will say, everyone is searching for sweetness. Right? The ants are searching, the turtles are searching for sweetness. We're also searching for sweetness. A part of the perfect that appears to be imperfect. That's all we're dealing with. A part of the perfect appears to be imperfect. That's the material world in a nutshell, and the material existence in a nutshell. Just a part of the perfect, floating like an iceberg in an ocean of consciousness. A part of the perfect appears to be imperfect from relative viewpoint. The false relative viewpoint of acquired prejudice, acquired tendency, based upon exploiting tendencies. And so people of that ilk think, they're all about self-expression, and I've just got to be me. Sure, you should be you, but find out who you are first. Don't assume that what you are at present, under layers of acquired prejudice, acquired tendency, and false ego, that false self, cocooning, enveloping the actual self, is the self that's worth all of this self-expression. And what is spirit for the most part? That which cannot be seen. Right? So sometimes Guru Maharaj would joke and say, we are devotees of the invisible. Right? Of that which you cannot see. What is beyond the grasp of ordinary people to see is clear to Brahmins. They can see it very easily. Just, there are many examples of that. What writers see, other people don't see. My photography teacher, she used to tell me about putting on your photographic eyes. Right? Your camera at your side, but you go into your photographic mode. Sometimes she'd start the class, she'd look out the window and go, well, it looks like an F8 type of day. She'd start calling out apertures because she put on her photographic eyes. Right? When, in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna wants to reveal something extraordinarily spiritual to Arjuna, he's saying, you cannot see this with your present eyes. So, Dibya Chakshu, I'm going to give you divine eyes so that you can see this. Have a glimpse of infinite perspective. Sticking with the photography example, there's short depth of field, and then there's a depth of field called infinity. Right? And the short, what's before you is in focus, everything else is blurred, and infinite depth of field, everything is in focus. So there's a perspective, infinite perspective, that's sought out by spiritually progressive people. A Brahmin who's meditating, lost in meditation, meaning he's not very conscious of the external world. He's deeply conscious of the internal world. And the noteworthy point is, it's on account of deep absorption in the internal world that he's not outer directed. It's not that by self-abnegation, by renouncing the objective world, that he's gone deep internally. That's the conventional stereotype, but that's not what is being underscored in the Bhagavatam or such literature. But rather they're saying, on account of deep internal absorption, the result is the objective world becomes secondary and adjusted. Like in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is saying, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasovarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Arjuna, they're having a discussion at this point about sense control. And he's saying, what's the point of controlling your senses if your mind is still obsessing over sense objects? It's actually a very interesting section. And in Prabhupada's purport to that, he says, it's better to be a sincere street sweeper than a charlatan meditator. Right? So he's saying, if the senses are controlled, but internally you're dwelling on them, it's like, what do we say? Intent is 9/10 of the law. We were speaking about this the other day. What qualifies something as karma is the mind is the seat of karma. It's not as much the action, but the internal motive. Just like in a criminal trial, when they have to, it's clear, both sides agree, let's say, both sides agree to what happened. The defense and the, what's the other side? The prosecuting attorney. They both agree to what happened. But what's going to determine culpability was motive. What was the person thinking at that time? That's going to make all the difference. Right? So in the Gita, Krishna says, just trying to renounce the objective world will prove futile in really subduing the senses or being misled by the senses. He's saying, but rather, rasovarjam rasopyasya param drishtva. We're back to the word rishi is encoded there. Param drishtva, superior experience. In the presence of a superior experience, automatically inferior experience retreats. That's the way. That's the best. A higher taste, lower taste vanishes. Drishtva, rishi, drishi, those who are seeing, experiencing the truth, they're not outer directed. So sometimes people will think, well, these ancient civilizations and culture were so advanced, how come they appear to be technologically primitive? Well, one way of looking at it is they were so inner directed that they only put the minimum effort in outer things. The old saying, simple living, high thinking. They didn't want to complicate unnecessarily their outer lives, is one way of looking at it. Knowledge above mortality has to be knowledge that's beyond limited world usefulness. Amnaya prahatatvam harimiha paramam sarvashakti rashabdim. Means descending. What's descending into this plane through divine agency? In other words, do you think it would be a good idea, if you could talk to Krishna right now and say, Krishna, what should I do? Do you think that would be valuable? And do you think he would give like a proper, you say, no, but you don't understand my situation. He goes, no, I do. I expand through Paramatma. I'm fully aware of, no, let me explain some things to you, like have happened recently. No, I'm also aware of those things. No, but I mean, do you really know how I feel about all this? I think I know how you feel about it too. Right? So it's the absolute personality of Godhead. Have an idea about what your situation is and what happened. The guy this afternoon, you don't understand like what happened. No, I mean, you should know what happened, right? And so, and you can say, well, I see, because I can like see a lot of stuff. I made these books that have like this type of advice in it, and then I've got like people who can interpret them, and if you connect with them, they can give you some good guidance. Are you sure? I'm pretty sure about it. I like thought it out way in advance. Been doing this like creation after creation. It gets old after a while. I mean, what are we thinking? We're thinking God's some character on a sitcom. Right? He can just, just laugh it off. Right? The absolute entity, the supreme reality, and as the writers, we cherish being the lords of our skull-sized kingdoms, right? And we're suspicious of allowing any sort of divine revelation or suggestion enter that domain. So we're the cause of our own misfortune. Udared atmanatmanam, atmanam avasadet, atmaeva yatmano bandhur, atmaeva ripur atmana. So Krishna tells Arjuna, your mind, Atma, your sense of self, you can say. Because, I mean, it says Atma, Atmanatmanam, well, the mind. Taking the mind as the best advisor of yourself, not a good idea, according to Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Saying, but it can become friendly to you and your needs, necessities, your mission, your purpose, your direction, if it can become infused with spiritual consideration that becomes known to us through the agency of Sadhu, Shastra, Guru, and Vaishnav. Jivas, what do they mean? Classic Bengali expression means crack-brained. There's schizophrenia in the clinical sense, but this sort of dual personality, it's like being crazy within the crazy world, because we're all in varying degrees insane, deluded, struggling with the senses, what do they say, manashastrani indriyani, prakriti stani karshati, struggling with the senses, of which, remember, you have 6 senses. The 5 obvious ones, and the mind. And the mind is the sense that we have the most problem with. Friend or enemy. There was a cartoon strip, comic strip in the 1960s, where during the time of the Vietnam War, so there's all use of the word enemy, who's the enemy, and that kind of thing. And what was in the comic strip was one famous line where one of the characters says to another one, "We have met the enemy, and the enemy is us." Which is the actual truth. We are the enemy, the mind that we think is our friend. The body's like a chariot, the senses are 5 horses, and the soul's like the passenger, and the mind is like you have an insane driver, crazy driver. Taking you for a ride. So Guru Maharaj often uses the example of like mental illness. Deluded into thinking you're someone you're not. So without getting sambandhagyan, a basic understanding of who I am and what my potential is, how can I proceed in a way that's actually beneficial for my self-discovery, self-realization, even ultimate autonomy? It's only one who's free from the influence of the mind and senses who's truly autonomous. Otherwise, we're under the influence of the senses, the mind. So have to come in connection with the proper agent who knows your identity, your reality potential, and can, under their guidance, you can engage in self-discovery, self-realization, self-actualization. Like the psychiatrist, they just have to bring the patient around to seeing things from that perspective. Give up the false ego, the false identity. That's why Guru Maharaj is called acquired prejudice. Become free from sanskar is to become free from acquired prejudice. Then ascharjavat paschati kaschirenam. To have a glimpse of our soul, our self, our reality potential will be astonishing, fill us with wonder, and fuel practice and participation and hope. I met a crazy man once at a bus stop outside of a mental institution. And we both were looking at a ladybug. And we were both like looking at this ladybug. And I said to him, what do you call a male ladybug? And he said, sir. And what he was showing me is like, I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid. And I thought, good point. I mean, sometimes here we have a lot of insect friends. I just saw a few on the way over. And sometimes, and they're in my room, I like to put them in little containers and let them go out the window. But sometimes I look at them and I imagine they're looking at me, and I think, I don't think I'm better, but sometimes I am a little surprised to realize there's a soul animating that insect body, and what takes you to that plane scares me at times. I'm not scared of the insect, but like being one. But Bhakti Vinod, see, he's not afraid of that. Kita janmaho jata tu andasha bahir mukha brahma nahi janmayash. See, real devotee, Bhakti Vinod Thakur is saying, I don't want to be Brahma if he's not a devotee. I'd rather be Kita, an insect in the house of a devotee. That is taken on a far, far greater, deeper level. And what does Raghunath Das say? the Prayojan Tattvacharya, that even the insects and the Dham are Mukunda Dvaita. They're dear to Krishna because they're Leelanukul, they're helping promote the pastimes. But Guru Maharaj would say, this kind of vision of seeing Dambasis as liberated souls, and that's what he calls Mukta Drishti. It's the vision of a liberated soul. Back to that. But we want to be under the influence of the vision of liberated souls, those who can see. They're seeing properly. That is the point. But relative has its necessity. So but we need, unless you properly conceive the absolute, then how will you know how to adjust the relative? Adjust it according to what? There has to be, again, that calibration. According to what? To what standard? No, all right, here's the absolute standard. Here we are locally. Adjust it like this. That'll be acceptable. There is nothing that is not Krishna and personal. Sometimes people misunderstand the Brahman and Brahma Jyoti. It's only appears to be impersonal from a distance. Saying, as you look with greater scrutiny and close-up, then you see that everything is personal. Sometimes when Guru Maharaj would push this to an extreme degree, Yajavar Maharaj would become a little flustered. And you're like, you mean this table is a person? Guru Maharaj, yes. Because he's saying, if it's an object is a cluster of subjective concepts floating in consciousness, then ultimately this is floating in consciousness, and consciousness can never ultimately be divorced of personality. Saying that's why rishis address the inanimate in personal ways. What appears to be inanimate. So the ocean, the river, Jamuna, Jala Brahma, spiritual water, Daru Brahma, spiritual wood, Shabda Brahma, spiritual sound. Guru Maharaj said one of the flaws of Islam, said they can understand the sound divine, but not the form divine. And the name of God is that sound, divine sound, but why not divine form? You can rightfully say, decry, or what's the word? Another word. Your own part. I'm not qualified. That is all okay. But don't say he's unqualified. Never say that. He's unqualified. We're unqualified. Correct. He's never unqualified. Nirguna doesn't mean he's unqualified. So, apanipado javanagrahita. He has no hands or legs, but he can receive offerings. And follow, be Sakshi Gopal. How? It's divine form. Divya Rupam. This is the foundation of spiritual life, spiritual aspiration, is recognizing our own deficiencies, candid assessment of our situation. So recognizing our own imperfections, right? But realizing that this element within us in the midst of so much imperfection, that seeks perfection is something very valuable, that tendency. So even in the midst of so much imperfection, there's this tendency to search for perfection, the ideal, the absolute. And he says, that tendency, he said, it's weak. As we told, Jiva's an impoverished Shakti. She needs to gain some wealth, some capital from a superior servitor, Ashraya Vigraha, Chit Shakti. Right? Come under their guidance and influence. He said, so this tendency to seek perfection is very weak, otherwise we would have it by now. We would have attained it. But, he said, so that's the nature of the finite, is to be subjected to imperfection. But that, and it points to the need we have to address that, to fulfill that, is beyond ourselves, is outside of ourselves. He said, so that makes room for the guru or the guide, which is the functioning principle of divinity, revealing himself in this world. And here Guru Maharaj says, and the perfect must, by dint of being the perfect, the means for revealing himself is something native to himself. Right? It's the infinite who can make itself known to the finite, as Guru Maharaj said, otherwise he's not infinite. And therein lies our prospect. And that's the beauty, mysterious charm of Krishna consciousness, is coming in connection with the infinite, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Absolute Truth, reality of the beautiful, by connecting with his agent, divine agency, Sri Guru, the divine guide. Because, and Guru Maharaj deals with this also there, he said, one might think, well, you can get all this internally. What is the need of help outside yourself? He said, but that voice within us is often unreliable. We cannot discern the voice of God, the voice of divinity, from our own speculative imaginings or wishful thinking or selective remembrance. He said, so very mercifully, Krishna comes before us as the guide or the guru to guide us from the world of imperfection toward the world of perfection. And by activating also our serving capacity,